Hello and good evening all. This is one of the constituent component videos of the 5 cars that barely got off the ground compilation, posted for data analysis purposes to determine which car will get a deep dive video in the future. For those of you wondering which video performed best out of all the 5 cars that never got off the ground videos, it was, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Ford J car, and I think that for that, I'm actually going to start working on a larger overview of the GT40 and its many variants, as I think the J car requires more context than some of the other vehicles mentioned in that video. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, let's fast forward to modernity and our last car with, well, a glimmer of hope in its development history, which is the technically not Acura Honda Performance Development, or HPD, ARX-04b. Honda's Performance Development Division had been making a pretty big splash in sports car racing in the late 2000s and early 2010s, taking the LMP2 fight to the likes of Courage, later Orica, Dallara, Lola, Pescarolo, and Zytek, admittedly with the use of Courage-based chassis for many of their early efforts. Using pretty much the same Courage-derived tub geometry in LMP1 and LMP2, HPD cars had won more than 70 class victories in the ALMS and the first World Endurance Championship LMP2 Championship with the ARX-01 and 03. The only blip on that particular radar was the ARX-02, not because it was unsuccessful, but because it was designed as a new Le Mans prototype for Honda and Acura directly by Würth Research as an LMP1. It went on to dominate the 2009 American Le Mans Series, at least when there wasn't a diesel spaceship squad around to spend more on catering than most of the teams were spending on the entire race weekend, but it lasted only a single season and was retired when the ARX-03 came out. 2014 brought a change in the LMP2 rules, and with it, a new car to replace the soon-to-be superannuated ARX-03. Following a naming convention staggering in its creativity, the replacement for it was the, wait for it, ARX-04. Such creativity, much wow. The new regulations, as we've discussed in a few other videos, pretty much required everyone to be either running closed cockpits immediately or in the imminent future, and so HPD took the opportunity to more radically design a new car for this closed cockpit LMP2 and LMP1 future, pursuing a closer relationship with Würth, who, apart from the 02, had primarily served as a chassis constructor for in-house derivatives of the Courage design. It was the first closed cockpit design for the Mark, and, like its preceding cars, was originally intended to be offered as both an LMP1 and LMP2, with the P1s having an A suffix, ARX-04A, and P2s having a B. Nevertheless, they would share a common monocoque, instead differentiated by powerplant and aero packages, with both monocoque and bodywork constructed from carbon fiber composites. The LMP1 would likely have been offered with an updated version of the 3.4-liter V8 featured in the ARX-03A and C, while the 04B did indeed carry over the 03B's HR28TT 2.8-liter twin-turbo V6 derived from the contemporaneous Acura and Honda road car lineup. In competition spec, this powerplant produced 450 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, sending power to the rear wheels through a 6-speed, paddle-operated sequential manual co-developed by HPD and Hewland, or at least modified by HPD from a Hewland original. In more continuations of the same, we had the suspension and stopping choices of the modern era, with double wishbones and pushrods keeping the wheels on the ground, and ventilated carbon disc brakes with 6-pot calipers keeping the wheels from hitting the tire barriers. Weight was the class-mandated 900 kilo minimum, and other parts were integrated to bring the new car in compliance with both the United Sports Car Championship and World Endurance Championship regulations, including a drive-by-wire throttle, while as much as could be carried over from the 03B was done so for the sakes of familiarity, reliability, and economics. In this venture, HPD had a partner committed to campaigning the LMP2 version in both championships, Extreme Speed Motorsports, and 2 cars had been delivered well in time for the season opener at Daytona. Thus, everything should have been fine and dandy. The 03B and its mechanicals were still fairly competitive, so with proven mechanicals, shiny new bodywork, a committed partner, experienced, what could possibly go wrong? As usual, when someone asks that question, just about everything. Ready for a big debut at Daytona, the number 1 car never made it out to set a qualifying lap, and almost worse, the number 2 car, driven by Johannes van Overbeek, was slower than the fastest prototype challenge qualifier, and almost last amongst all of the prototype class cars. In the race, the fortunes were reversed. The number 2 car, which had been inexplicably gridded in 12th position, was out after only 50 completed laps, shortly after the poor old Delta Wing, and the number 1 soldiered on to make it just over halfway in terms of total laps completed, but between their slow pace, poor aerodynamics, and other more typical new car teething issues, they would have required an absolute miracle of unspeakable proportions to really do well against the rest of the field that day. The leader of HPD at the time was quoted as saying, "We didn't show well at Daytona." Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Extreme Speed were so disappointed that they dusted off their 03Bs as a stopgap and worked on developing the car, but they gave that up as a bad job pretty quickly as well, opting instead to order Ligier LMP2s for the World Endurance Championship campaign, and only contesting the Sebring round of the United Sports Car Championship with the older car. They returned the subsequent year with their Ligiers for the endurance rounds of the inaugural IMSA season, and won in class at Daytona and Sebring. So clearly it wasn't really that big of an issue on the team side of things. Some bright spark within the HPD organization decided that, rather than endurance racing, perhaps the car would be suitable for hill climbing, and an entry at Pikes Peak was prepared, but it failed to compete because of a busted turbocharger. Then, in 2016, Michael Shank Racing somehow got their hands on an updated version of the car and started testing it with a potential eye towards reviving the car for competition, but the improvements, while praised, were apparently insufficient, and it was merely relegated to tire testing for the subsequent season. 2 historic events have since seen an ARX-04b entered. No ARX-04a was ever completed, once in 2023 at Silverstone and once in 2024 at Donington Park, the latter where it broke the LMP2 lap record, but as far as true competition history is concerned, it remains the first of our seriously unsuccessful vehicles despite its lovely paint job. Now I want a margarita.